All right, welcome everyone to the Nobody Studios Inside Culture live stream show, and I am so excited to talk to you about this conversation today. As I was preparing for this conversation, I was thinking about who would be the best person to talk about sort of why it's important for all of us to embrace different cultures, different perspectives. And there's no one better to talk to than one of our valued nobodies and just an incredible visionary, Rumi Contractor. Rumi has been all over the globe. He could tell you where he's, joining us today from. And he's had over 30 years of experience really helping to build winning teams. And so I look for these opportunities to just pick the brain of someone who's been there, who's done that, and can teach us and share sort of some of the lessons that he's learned. And I'm so excited, and that Rumi's now joined our Nobody Studio team and is going to be bringing all of his wisdom to helping us just take this culture to a whole nother level. So Rumi, welcome to the show, and thank you again for making time to have this conversation with me.
Thank you. My pleasure, Sejal. Looking forward to it. And I'm speaking, or rather, I'm online from a city that I doubt anyone knows, called Curitiba, uh, in a country called Brazil, which everyone knows. But this is a city south of Sao Paulo, and I've had this place here for 20 years. I love coming here during winter, which is the south of the equator. So here I am.
Well, look, I want to just jump right in, right? Look, you've been helping build winning teams, and we both agree that teaching your teams to embrace different cultures or diverse cultures is one of the key pieces of building those teams, right? So, talk to me a little bit about how you've sort of gone about it. How has this concept of embracing diverse cultures been instrumental in your journey?
So I think, no, like you said, I think, in today's world, especially I think over the last 3 years, what we've seen is we are kind of constantly getting online with, we are not even talking about where you are. I mean, it's just so happens you're sitting somewhere in California and I'm sitting here somewhere in south of Brazil, and whoever else is listening to this podcast is sitting wherever they are sitting, somewhere in the US or in the southern hemisphere. I don't really, we don't really know, and nobody really cares. But on the other hand, um, understanding that there are cultural differences is key, and accepting that these differences will exist, especially if you're putting a team together and you have a mission statement to accomplish. You must understand how people think, work, behave. um, so I think, again, I'm not here to kind of pontificate on how people should do anything. I'm here to talk about my journey and how diversity, or accepting diversity, is never really been a big thing for me, because of my upbringing. Um, I mean, I kind of I was born in India, but in a small, very minute community of about 60,000 people called Parsis. So here we are, this little community in this 1 billion point something million, hundreds of million people, 1.5 billion people in India, and this community of 60, 70,000. Um, and I think from the very beginning, I think this community kind of bred in itself the need to kind of accept that we needed to accept what was around us.
Hmm.
What was around us wasn't going to accept what we were, but they already had, by allowing us to come to India 1,000 years ago from Iran and set up a base. So I think from my family roots onwards, uh, religion was something that we all practiced, but we were never kind of forced into just doing or giving importance to our religion or our culture. And I ended up going into a Catholic school, where these Jesuits were from Spain. So again, I had this amazing opportunity to listen to these Jesuit priests from who had left everything out there in Europe and were down in India teaching us, and giving us this, increasing our level of curiosity. I think that that is the best way I can kind of. Diversity comes when your ears are open. Diversity comes when your mind wants to learn something else. And for me, that was truly amazing. Another personal little example of kind of how diversity has played a role in my life. My grandfather, in his latter years, became a Buddhist, a very staunch Buddhist, and
Mhm.
it kind of threw everyone a curveball in the family. That what is he doing? Why is he doing it? But it was his need to kind of learn about something that had always interested him. And in his latter years, he decided to kind of go into a monastery and do that for the next
Mhm.
5 years. So in my case, I kind of I had the opportunity to grow alongside students and friends who were Catholics, Hindus, Muslims, and as such, diversity was something that I kind of engaged in each and every day, and
Mhm.
it was like being fed to me from a fire hose. Um, and as I said, I think the priests that I worked with uh, truly opened my mind to what existed. And I don't know about your family, Sejal, but in my house, my biggest at that time, my biggest kind of hobby was to go and see the Hollywood movies. Uh, and you kind of got this amazing thing on screen about what life is somewhere there, and that just made me very passionate that as soon as possible, I'm going to leave India and I'm going to travel to all these places and meet all these different cultures. So for me, that's been my upbringing. And so I think I kind of had diversity kind of not thrust upon me, but kind of made it possible for me to
Mhm.
absorb and appreciate it.
Yeah, no, this is why you and I connect so much because I we've gone through the similar kind of personal experiences together, and yeah, I mean, I had to embrace diverse cultures from very early, from the very beginning, right? So my parents are immigrants from India, and I was born here, so I had to embrace both the American and the Indian culture right from the beginning, and that's honestly been instrumental in my journey, right? It's really helped me sort of, I guess you could call it connect with people, from different backgrounds. It makes it really easy so I can build those stronger relationships with people because I could see it from all of the different perspectives, and I think that's why it's so important that we're having this conversation because the advice that, I mean, not the advice, but like what I want to dig into a little bit more from you and hear your perspective because we run into people all the time that are closed minded, that really are just not able to genuinely appreciate diverse perspectives. So what are some ways that we can cultivate an open mind and help people sort of broaden their perspective? What are some things that you do? Because I know you run into them. I do in the work that I run into that issue all the time, right? So
So I think again, I kind of look at things that happen in our life. I mean, I got married at an early age. My ex-wife is Scottish, so there I was in another cultural uh, difference. I mean, I could have either looked at that as a problem, or I could have looked at that as an opportunity to learn something about a new culture, and I did. I love it. My daughters both are Scottish, American, Indian,
mhm,
Zoroastrian, whatever you want to call them, a mutt. But I think there is a lot of beauty in it because they are never kind of stunned by most things. Not that they have to accept it or like it. Uh, I think, but you have to be able to kind of identify that there is some difference going on over here
mhm,
with individuals that you have in your team. I'm married to a Brazilian. My wife is Brazilian. We've been married for 25 years, almost a quarter century. And I love the Brazilian culture. And yet, there were many foreigners who came with me when we first came here in the late 90s who just did not enjoy it.
mhm,
Uh, and I think so. I think the first important thing that I feel one has to have is an open mind that there
mhm,
are going to be differences and just accept it. You cannot tell everyone to behave one way. Now, I will say this, you can set what I call standards that you want the team to conform to. And
mhm,
those are standards that you set that are mutually acceptable and are not something that have a religious connotation or your personal preference. It is what good best practice would look like. And
Exactly.
so even in an organ, because I had the amazing fortune of working for an amazing company like HSBC. I joined them in New York, and literally 6 months after I joined them in New York, they sent me to Hong Kong. It was one of the best things that could have ever happened to me. I mean, I got to see the Chinese way, the Hong Kong Chinese work and work ethic.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. I mean, there was this concentration of getting the job done today and not leaving till the job gets done.
Mm.
Uh, on the other hand, when you work in the US, you have this cacophony of different thoughts and ideas that get thrown into, which you would never see in China.
Mm-hmm.
So you have to be able to say, okay, I like this diverse thinking and open mindedness about challenging an idea. And I would
Mm-hmm.
kind of sit in a meeting in Hong Kong and I'd say, I think we should do this. And for the first 2 weeks, I found everyone kind of just said, yeah, okay. And I kind of felt great. I said, wow, this is so much better than the US, where every time I said we should do it this way, three other guys told me why it can't be done.
Mm.
And then 2 weeks later, I realized actually I wasn't getting any feedback. There was no feedback mechanism to me because everyone thought they had to just agree with me because that was
Mm.
the culture. So
Yeah.
I wanted to kind of break that culture, but I wanted to introduce it to my team in Hong Kong in a way that it did not offend them or they did not lose face. And the way to do that is that not everything I say is God's honest truth. I mean, I need you to challenge me. I need you to give me
Mm-hmm.
your point of view perspective. And then, of course, it takes a while. That just because that conversation takes place doesn't really mean that next day people are going to start challenging you.
That's right.
On the other hand, planning and sticking to a plan is what I think a lot of things that I appreciated in China. I needed to bring that to my team here in Brazil.
Mm-hmm.
Because in Brazil, when I worked over here, the central bank made changes on the fly, and people were used to making systematic changes on the fly, not testing it, putting it into production. So how do you change what is around you and bring in your cultural reality is by having those what I call conversations with the team to explain what works, why it should work that way, and you can build a culture of your own within the team, but it has to be done with the consensus of the team and not just a one-way direction of setting is up, because otherwise to me that's not a culture, that's just a mandate that you're putting in front of people.
Oh my God, that seriously, everything you just said just deeply resonates with me. And I think the most important point is I want people to make sure they heard, right? Is that it has to be intentional. It
Yeah,
requires intentional effort. You have to meet people where they are, and it's really important, to try to at least from the when I think about sort of at Nobody Studios, one of the things that we always keep coming back to is look, we need to make sure we create spaces where people can have open dialogue and express their opinions, their unique perspectives, and that they're comfortable in doing that. Right. So that's really going to be a very intentional way of making sure that that becomes part of the culture there. And I love that you said that, because when I just listened to your stories about all of the different perspectives, the deep, the different diverse perspectives that you've seen and experienced in your life. I mean, it's exactly that type of exposure that people need to put themselves through that, and I always remind myself that even if we haven't had a lot of exposure to it, it doesn't mean we can't start now, right? Like we can start now and go, start engaging into, different cultural events, talk to people, look at who you're spending your time with and say, how could I increase the diversity in the group of the people that I'm socializing with? Like LinkedIn, you and I are both on LinkedIn, right? And you have an opportunity right now where you can connect with people all over the globe.
absolutely.
Like it's at our fingertips. So I hope people understand that, yes, some of us have been forced into, embracing different perspectives. And some of us, can have are starting now, right? But no matter where you are, I think as an organization, if you don't build that into your fabric of your organization, you just can't survive
Well, I
because
mean,
it's here.
as you said, Sejal, I mean, think about what is going on in the world today. I mean, we've got these groups of or islands of people and information. I mean, the some of these islands and information kind of isolation can only change when you decide to step off that island and cross over to another island and are open to receiving another perspective or point of view.
Hmm.
You don't, I mean, there are many, I mean, I have some amazing friends that who with whom I can have some of the most idiotic or some of the most insane conversations, and we walk away from it appreciating the other person's point of view, even if we don't kind of uh, agree to what the other person is saying. But I
Yeah.
can understand why they may have a certain reality stuck in their head, whereas I have another one, and it's
Hmm.
because we come from two very different backgrounds, maybe, or our experiences are
Hmm.
completely different,
Yeah.
and so I have to be able to. I don't need to agree with it, but I have to be able to understand why that person arrived at this conclusion. And
Hmm.
to me, right now, because of the 256 byte messaging, very little gets communicated in a clear and informative manner. And therefore, it is up to us, if you are curious, to go and figure out what the other 256 bytes are, and then what the other 256 bytes are, because that's the only way you're going to kind of create an understanding. And if this happens in the outside of your work environment, imagine how much of it happens inside your organization itself, especially when people are no longer sitting down face to face every day. So it
Hmm.
becomes even more important, one would think, to understand a point of view and then have a discussion about it. And I think you cannot, at least in a leadership position, you cannot build a culture where people are afraid to have a perspective put forward.
Hmm.
Companies that talk about diversity, open transparency, etc. But I have to say, from the top down, very little of it really gets practiced. So
Hmm.
when it comes to walking that talk, that's when the problems start. So
That's right. It's so true. And I know we're almost out of time, but when you were talking, something jumped out at me. So I have to ask you about this, right? So I agree with everything you're saying, but sometimes I get resistance from people when I'm explaining this to them. And one of the things I hear over and over again, and I'm curious to know your perspective on this, is, well, how do I, as you know, I'm okay with different cultures. I embrace different cultures, but how do I maintain my own cultural identity and still be receptive to other people's cultural identities? Like, it's a fine line. So how do you respond to that? Because I feel like people
hmm,
almost think that if they embrace other cultures, they're kind of giving up their own freedom or their own
I think
culture.
you kind of said it, because I'm very individualistic. I think my style and my personality, I mean, at least I'm told that it's not for everyone.
Hmm.
I'm an acquired taste for a lot of people. So I know that I have my personality,
Hmm.
which is mine, and there are some really good things that I may have in my personality and my kind of get up, and but there are certain things that I know that I have to work harder to get better at.
Hmm.
So I think we are all a brand. We create our own brand, just like a company has its own brand. You are a brand. And I don't think you should kind of dilute your brand to become like somebody else's brand. You should
Hmm.
maintain your brand, but you should be aware that there are other brands around you that value certain things differently. So in my brand, I value honesty, I value loyalty at the top of my
Mm,
needs and requirements. But that does not mean that the other three people around me have the same requirements. They may
mm,
value something else, which is at the top of their list. Doesn't make them better or worse. Neither do I, nor do I have to go and change my brand
mhm,
image to say, okay, now I'm kind of positioning my values from 1 to 10 in a different order. Now, if you do it because over a period of time you start seeing certain things that you value more in another brand,
mhm,
isn't that amazing that you are now able to kind of bring it inside your
mhm,
brand? So I see no loss of, I mean, I only see a win win by engaging with others, by understanding that your brand does not get devalued, by understanding what the other brand is talking about. And who knows, at least I know that in the last 30, 40 years, my personal brand has gone through certain change.
mhm.
It has not changed the fundamentals of who I was and who
Sure.
I am today. But I
Well,
feel that if you don't change at all and you keep going through life being the same, at least for me, that would be one boring life that you led.
agreed. We're always growing, I hope. Some grow at different
Or at least
paces.
experiencing new things. I
Yeah.
mean, and
Yeah.
to me, adding to your cultural kind of
Mhm.
depth is only a good thing. It can't be a bad thing.
Yeah, I mean, I think, it's a delicate balance, everything that we're talking about, right? I think there's
Yeah.
no one size, it doesn't work for everybody, but I think we both agree that it starts with understanding our own values, whether it's cultural values, whether it's core values, whatever you want to call it, but understanding your own personal values, right? And knowing that these are what's going to shape me for the person that I am today. And those change over time, right? Like what my values were before my son was born are very different than after he was born, right?
Yeah.
So the values change. But I think we have to like check in with ourselves and say, hey, what are my values? And am I aligning my behavior with those values? Am I surrounding myself with people who also value similar things as I do? Because I think it is important to surround yourself with who are, value similar things. But I also like what you said is that I think we have to stay open that there's going to be other people that are going to come and go or come into our lives that are going to have different values, and we can learn from that, and that might shape our own values, and we have to respect their sort of their values and wherever however they prioritize them. You said so many incredible things. I am honestly, thank you so much for taking time. I know I went a little bit over. I said I would keep it around 20 minutes, and we're like 3 minutes over now, but I knew this was going to happen with us anyway. So thank you again for making time. I'm so excited you're part of the Nobody team, and I'm really looking forward to having more conversations with you about culture at Nobody Studios and how we can kind of join forces there to really make sure that we keep the studio and each one of us within the studio true to our own personal values, but also our shared values as a studio,
I
right?
agree.
So
I mean,
thank you again.
almost everyone that I've met at Nobody Studios is from a different country, different cultural background, different domain, and to me, that is the spice of life. At least I feel I kind of get energized to learn uh, different kind of stuff that we are doing with the different startups. When I'm talking to Thought Forma or I'm talking to Parentivity or whoever, whoever that I have kind of engaged with, and that's what attracted me the first time I spoke with Mark as well, was his need to kind of create this diversity, not just in terms of people, but in terms of the kind of companies we were going to launch and kind of put out there in the world. So thank you, Sejal.
You're
Pleasure to
welcome.
be
Yeah.
here.
Thank you. I'm so grateful for you being a part of the team. Thank you, everybody, for joining us today. Look, we would love for you to take a look at what we're doing. Check out our website, follow us on LinkedIn, look at ways that you may want to be a part of this journey. There's a lot of different ways for people to contribute to what we're doing. If you have talent and you want to be a part of one of the, our goal is to make 100 new companies in the next 5 years. So we're going to be needing a lot of people in our Nobody network to make that happen. So there's a lot of different ways to get involved, and everybody, has a lot of different ways of, whether it's an hour a week to 10 hours a week or whatever, there's a lot of different ways we can make that happen. So check us out, and I will see you next time on Inside Nobody Culture Live. Thank you, everybody. Bye.
Thanks, Sejal. Bye.
Bye.